origin of the Viet Cong. You see, in World War II, the French had nothing to do with their own fall. They said, give me some more places to rule. So they went to Southeast Asia, and their little colonial empire grew. They took control of Vietnam and what is now known as Cambodia too. The Japanese had just had a big fall too, like whoo. So they came back to help supervise the French colony that was new. Because since the evil of the Axis, Japan had France's back like mattresses. But just see, what happened is these cooperations teamed up with the Vietnamese nationalists, pissed off some of the communist masses. So in 1941, they decided to become a little more active and ran through some of the French military packages, just like laxatives. The army called themselves the Viet Minh. A coalition formed at Pac Bo in 1941 on May 19 by a man for 30 years Vietnam hadn't even seen. He was only 21 back when he left on a boat powered by steam for a job in the kitchen, helping with the cuisine. A boat took him to France. His education he wished to advance. Schools gave him no chance. So when Sun King spent his time learning how the West was won, face in a book, taking a look at Western society, he moved to United States propriety in New York and Boston, where he would admirably conversate with Korean nationalists who would start to shape his future political outtake, and it would never be undone. Next, he moved to London. He was still working around some onions. Then he went back to Paris, France. He gave politics a chance, put on some diplomatic pants, and found his new romance, where he would try to petition Mr. President Woodrow Wilson in the spirit, language, and rhythm of the U.S. Declaration of Independence. As for the recognition of the civil rights of the Vietnamese and their mission to gain a new nationalist independence, his scripts were ignored and he learned of communism. He was now a hero of the movement against colonialism, made some friends that were comrade living. He moved in with him in the Soviet Union, bouncing around to many places, talked to different races, while lecturing different ages. At the same time, he was organizing many cases inspired on a communist basis. Fast forward back to 1941, all he really wanted to get done was a revolt against the French begun. So the formerly known as Nguyen Sun King, now known as Ho Chi Minh, would be the leader of this revolt that in 1945 was about to begin. They fought Japan and France for a long time and got the military backing of the U.S. forces and weapons also from Beijing. So now it's 1954, the signing of the Geneva Accord, dividing the South and the North, attempting to bring an end to these wars with Ho Chi Minh as Prime Minister in the North and Bao Dai as Emperor of the South. They were going to have a vote in 56 to sort it all out. So they were going to give people almost a year to make a new house, whether it be in the North or the South. But especially in the North, corruption was spread throughout. Some say the Viet Minh wouldn't let nobody out. By the way, the U.S. supported the South, and they said Ho Chi Minh couldn't be trusted. His communist affiliation smelled kind of musty. His reputation for revolution was busted. The Geneva Accord papers were getting kind of dusted, and Viet Minh weapons and power was getting kind of rusted. So the Viet Minh now seemed dismantled and scattered around like ants on an anthill until they regrouped like wax on a candle and came up with a new tag like a vandal. You see it first in prints in newspapers of Saigon in 1956. So it's probably when the Viet Cong came to exist. Vietnamese communist is what that translates to in English. They were upfront with their intent. It was to overthrow the camouflage colonial regime of American imperialists. In 1960, they decided to officially establish the National Liberation Front, abbreviated NLF. Then in 1961, the U.S. would start to triple its involvement. It wasn't until 65 the U.S. sent in combat units, and in 68, the Viet Cong best known action was the Tet Offensive, where they took the U.S. and the South Vietnamese forces by surprise during a 2-day ceasefire around the sunrise on a holiday of the new lunar year. Instead of celebrating, they chose to uprise. So over these next 2 days, 80,000 communist troops would invade about 100 towns and cities, executing anyone in the way. Most significant place they chose to raid was Saigon, and it was the U.S. Embassy. They kept fighting for years to spark negotiations and treaties. A virtual stalemate, the U.S. began its so-called Vietnamization, pulling out forces and allowing them to become a communist nation. Shout out to Noodle Productions and Wikipedia, written by Tiffany Jordan, performed by Jason Lennon.